The following is a production of Shark Flight Media.
From mechs to mages or agents to argonauts, this is the world of Chris Kennedy Publishing. This is the CKP Future Books Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the September edition of Future Books. This month, we once again have our intrepid publisher, Chris Kennedy, with us, who's taken time out of his busy schedule to come and talk to us about the September releases. And man, we've got a bunch this month. We've got 5, and we are looking forward to going into in-depth detail on these books. But first, we want to say hey to Chris. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and let everyone know what's coming down the pike.
Well, I tell you what, we've got a full slate for the month of September, and a lot of our favorite authors are coming back this month. We've got Paul Piatt, we've got Nick Plume, we've got one of the 3 horsemen of CKP Publishing, Kevin Ikenberry. We've got a new series by D.T. Reed, who's going to be our author guest this month, and we're going to wrap it up with a Salvage title novel. So, man, we have got a busy month and a lot of books to talk about.
Busy month and lots of good stuff to talk about. I've been looking forward to this for a while. We got some really neat stuff this month.
Well, this is an all-star month, and we're going to start off with Paul Piatt, who has written several of the Abner Fortis books, all of the Abner Fortis books, but one of our favorite new series from CKP with a catchphrase that we're beginning to hear more and more when we go to conventions and things like that. We've got Peace Dividend. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure thing. It's the 9th book. Actually, we're up to 9 now on Abner Fortis, ISMC, International Space Marine Corps. And the catchphrase is DINLY, do it, not like it. And that has started showing up in other CKP books too. So, it's getting around. It is, like I said, the 9th book in the series. They have pulled back from Maltan. And what do you do when there's the end of a war? You sell off all your stuff and try and reap the peace dividend. And that's what the government's doing. So of course, immediately something bad happens. Of course. And there's nobody to handle it anymore because you've furloughed all the people and sold off all the stuff. Well, what happens if you accidentally sell off one of the big ships and it's still got a planet buster inside it? Then you have bad things. And this book actually reaches back to one of the first couple books where they had the Kuiper Knights. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but Kuiper Knights, and they've got it. So there is much badness about to happen, and guess who's called to save the day? That would be Abner.
That would be Abner. I tell you what, Paul is firing on all cylinders. He, I don't know where he did his writing and publishing internship, but man, he got every bit of good out of that he could get.
He actually interned. He was the CKP intern.
That's what I was referring
to. Well, yes, he did. He learned at the hands of greatness.
He did learn. He sat at the feet of greatness and took it all in.
He really did, and we beat on him a lot at the start. No, don't do that. Yes, do more of this. He came in at about the same time as John Sears. And they've been going back and forth, book 1, book 2, book 2. And John just released book 9, and this is his book 9. I think that they've both really come a long way, and they're really hitting their strides. So this is another great book by in the Abner Fortis vein. I actually spoke with him here this week. He has books 10 through 14 mapped out, and we talked about that. So there's still plenty more to come, and it's all good stuff.
It'd be amazing what he could do if he actually was able to just focus on one thing and do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what that was like.
Yeah.
But apparently it's neat.
Well, it seems to be working for him. He's at 8 books in 4 years. So he's doing great, and I couldn't agree with you more. And mentioning John Sears, this new book by him, which is already out, is
Stand on Xanadu.
Is so good. So both of these books are for sure winners. And so if you're looking for something to read until Peace Dividend comes out, John Sears is a good choice.
Absolutely.
Then on September 8th, we've got a new Tenery book, Tempered by Blood by Nick Plume, one of the newer authors at CKP. And she's another one that's firing on all cylinders. This is our third Tenery novel. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think that, this series also got better and better as it went along. I like the first book just fine. Second book's even better. Third book's even better. There's enough intrigue. There's combat. There's all the good things of the first couple, only there are more. I really like this series. It's a little bit different than some of the other CKP books and series, but different in a good way. There's a lot more trying to figure out what's going on. And I really like that. This book will tie up Tenery, but then there will be another, it's projected for another couple trilogies with the same folks moving on from here. So it'll just be a different place, but the same people. So, if you're one of those people that really like series that have more than, a couple, 3 books, jump right in. Don't be afraid. There's going to be plenty for you.
I will expand on that a little bit. Nick Plume, this series is military science fiction, but it's a little bit different than any of the other military science fiction series that we've published in the past. So the group dynamics make this series very enjoyable. So if you're looking for something that you're not going to have to make a huge investment in time, that there's 47 books in the series, or you feel like you've read 10 military science fiction books in a row and they're all basically different colors of the same story, this is a good book to try because it's a little different, a little off center from your traditional military science fiction.
Yeah, there's a lot more intellectual, trying to figure out what's going on, figuring out the mysteries of who's doing what to whom, and more importantly, why.
Yes.
So you really some of that starts coming clear here in this one, and it's really neat.
So yeah, if you want to try something different, Nick Plume, Tenery, this is definitely a series I would not recommend somebody to buy the third one and start with it. This is definitely a series that you want to start with the first one and go and read all 3. Yeah,
absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more.
Now, from the CKP Mount Rushmore, we have Kevin Ikenberry coming down to grace us mortal people with his writing expertise. We've got Volunteer Fury by Kevin coming out on the 15th. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. This is the 4th book in the Guardian Covenant, which he and I are jointly writing. We did the first one together. He did the second. I did the third. He did the 4th. We actually think that Kevin Steverson may do the 5th before I come back in again. But in the last stand, and you'll have to close your ears for a second if you're afraid of spoilers and you haven't read it, humanity has to leave Earth because of the Gimpha, giant space monsters, you can think of them as kaiju of a sort, arrive, and we build 100-foot tall mecha to combat them. We then go out among the stars with some of our friendly races, but the kaiju have followed us, and this is the 4th book. Like I said, Kevin's been showing Lua, the planet Lua, which is where humanity has fled to. We've been given a planet. Unfortunately, the kaiju are now there too. So he's working to fight them off. And this is the 2nd book showing the battle to save Lua. We failed with Earth. Will we survive there?
That's very interesting. I can't wait to read that. The next book that comes out is on September 22nd, and this is one I'm very excited about. You have authors where, they're very prolific. They write a lot of books. You pick a book up, and you read the first 30 pages, and you know exactly who it is. Some of that is for good. Some of it's for ill. It's really according to how good the author is and how good of a storyteller they are. D.T. Reed is relatively new to CKP, and she wrote the Seventh Shaman books, which was something that I thought was a complete departure from almost everything that CKP had published in the past. In my opinion, this is one of the most important books, one of the most important series that CKP has written. So when you told me that she had a new book, and I was fortunate enough to get a copy of it and read it several months ago, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if it was just going to be another series of books that would be very reminiscent to the Seventh Shaman books. This is completely different. This series, if you want a modern day fusion of Tarzan and John Carter of Mars, this is the series for you. The first book is called GANWOLD'S Child. Once again, the covers just keep getting better and better. I got to see the cover for this book a week or so ago. You could not have asked for a cover to tell the story that's within the book better than this cover. This is a really surprising, really good novel, and I strongly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was previously published by Tor. It then went out of publication, and I picked it up. I don't think that they really advertised it as much. You know, she was one of their more junior authors, and you know, for TradPub, if you're not the headliner, they throw it out there. You know, they basically just kind of
swim on its own.
Yeah, they throw the spaghetti against the wall and see which ones will stick. And I guess this one didn't stick. I've never seen the original cover, so I don't know how much love they gave to it, but I will tell you what, I agree with you 100%. I said in January when we got the cover to the sixth Last Marines book, which was the Valhalla Awaits or Valhalla Rising, I said, this is the best cover of the year. Well, it was the best cover of the year for about 8 months. And this one is now taken over because you are absolutely right. You take one look at the cover and you know what you're getting with this book. It is a great, great cover by Jake at JK Design. He gave us everything we're asking for, plus some. You know, I couldn't be happier with this cover and with the series.
Well, everybody's in for a big surprise. If you've read DT Reed before and you think you're getting another book in the same series in the Seventh Shaman, you are going to be completely surprised because this could be from a completely different author. It is that different, and it is so good. Absolutely. And I'm a fan of DT Reed personally. Last year I said I thought the best book of the year was I think the second one in the Seventh Shaman series. And I stand by, you know, just for storytelling and story. You know, so she knows how to tell stories, and I'm really looking forward to republishing this series because it's awesome. And before we move on from this, if you want to know more about GANWOLD'S Child and you want to know more about the Seventh Shaman, DT Reed will be our featured author in the second half of the podcast, and we will be going into more of a deep dive on GANWOLD'S Child in the second half of the podcast. And then we wrap up the month of September with Tales of Revenge. And unless there's a typo, Tales is spelled Tails. So I don't think these are stories of revenge. And it's
no, they are not. For those that have followed Alex Rath, he already has 2 books in the Salvage title series that are revolving around the Serpentes, basically giant snakes. And this is the third one in that trilogy. Tales of Revenge, they are fighting a war against slavers, and they're ready to take the fight to the slavers and try and end their reign once and for all. That's where this is going. You experience it from the front lines, as well as there's a portion that takes place on the home world where, you know, humans have been living under the rule of the snakes for a while. The snakes freed them all, and there are some people that aren't happy with just being freed. They want to now be in charge. So there's both some civil discontent as well as, you know, a war going on, and Alex does a great job tying that all up together in this.
I tell you what, that is a full month for the month of September. 5 novels. 1, 2, 3, 4 by long-established CKP authors, and then one by a relatively new author. So there's something here for everyone that reads CKP books. I can't wait. This is getting exciting. We're getting down toward the end of the year. FactoryCon, is it full?
There's still a couple spots left. I know I saw the other day, I think there were 3 RV slots, 1 cabin, and then 3 RV slots not on the water. 3 waterfront and 3, off the water. So there's still some rooms available. I know there's going to be one more that isn't able to make it, so there'll probably be one more cabin opening up. Encourage everyone to come, hang out, meet the authors, and have a great time.
Yeah, it's the annual CKP get together. If you want an opportunity to meet your favorite authors, maybe hear some spoilers, learn some stuff that may be coming out in the next couple of years, just hang out, have some good food, good fellowship, filk a little bit, talk to people, make good friendships. This is a great convention to go to. So you can go to the CKP Facebook page or the CKP website and get more information.
Absolutely. It's October 20th through the 22nd. And it's not a typical convention where there are panels and things like that. This is all just fellowship, hanging out. There's a cornhole tournament. There's fishing. There's DJ one night. There's a potluck one night. It's all just about hanging out and enjoying life.
And that pretty much wraps up the month. Lots of audiobooks coming out in the month of September. There's 4 or 5.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I just approved one today, Pirates and Payback, which is the Nick Steverson and Melissa Olthoff. It's the second in their trilogy. So that should be out here shortly. That's by Daniel Wisniewski, and he had a ball doing this one. He was laughing, I think, the whole time. And
yeah, Pirates and Payback is Bob's Burgers of science fiction.
It's going to be great, and the only thing that's going to top it is when he gets to the third book, Privateers and Pandemonium.
Absolutely,
which he is starting here this week, and has promised to have to me by the day after Labor Day. So that'll follow pretty quickly upon it. So jump in on that. We also have.
This is a series. I was just going to say, this is a series that is actually better as an audiobook, I think, than as a written book. As a written book, it's hilarious. You can't put it down. It's one of the reads where you start reading it and it's so engaging, so entertaining, you can't put it down. But when you listen to it as an audiobook, it's almost like watching a cartoon in your head.
And he had a really good time doing this, and I know Nick and Melissa have listened to it, and they were just dying laughing too, and they knew what was coming. So
this is the closest CKP will ever come to being a Warner Brothers.
Yep. Let's see. There's also Among the Embers, Fallen World anthology. In audio, there is one of The Prince of Britannia by Fred Hughes, Prince Peacemaker, that comes out middle of the month. Hopefully Privateers and Pandemonium by the end of the month. So lots of good stuff coming.
Well, we better let you get your nose back to the grindstone. We know that you get 28 to 30 hours a day, where the rest of us only get 24, but then you feel it. So we probably ought to let you go back to doing the things you need to do so that we can have good books to read in December.
All right. I'll get back on it.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for listening to the first half of the podcast. We're looking forward to the upcoming releases. And for our author interview this month, we are speaking with author Diane Reed. She has written a series for Chris Kennedy Publishing called The Seventh Shaman. If you have not read that, you definitely want to. It is unlike any other science fiction that I know of that is currently being published. It has a real Native American feel, and it is a great story. But today we're going to talk to her mostly about a new series that'll be coming out this month. And the first book in the series is GANWOLD'S Child. I think that this is something that everyone will love. And this is a book that, unlike many that are published by CKP, this can be read by people of all ages. This is a book that you can read and then you can pass off to family members to read. It's a very good book. And so welcome, Diane, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let's spend a few minutes talking about the Seventh Shaman series, since all of them are out, or at least 4 of them are out right now. And then we will talk in detail about GANWOLD'S Child and where you plan to be going with that series. Tell us a little bit about the Seventh Shaman and what got you started writing that particular series.
Okay, well, first, it is going to be a 7-book series. I was hoping to turn in book 5 by the end of July, and then got interrupted. So, well, I can tell you a little bit about that. There's a guy named Jim McCoy who does he has a blog, and he does reviews of science fiction and fantasy movies and books. He had reviewed the first 4 of the Seventh Shaman, and being a veteran, he decided for Memorial Day, he wanted to feature the books of 4 different veterans, and I was one of them that he chose. And I said, Jim, you've already reviewed the 4 that are out, and the 5th one's going to be a while. And he said, oh, I went back and found your backlist. And I'm going, oh, no, not my Training Wheels books. These things were published originally nearly 30 years ago, 27 years ago when GANWOLD came out the first time. And I thought, oh my gosh, no. Well, he reviewed GANWOLD, gave it 5 stars. He proceeded to say, have you ever offered this to Chris? And I said, no, I haven't. And he said, well, you need to. It's good. So I sent Chris the link to Jim's review, and he emailed back and said, well, send me the first book. And so I did. And within 2 weeks, I think, he emailed me again and said, I want the whole trilogy. So book 5 of the Seventh Shaman got put on hold, and then there'll be 2 more after that. My goal now is to have book 5 turned into him by the end of October.
That's great.
So we'll see.
That's very much like John Sears. He had written the Lunar Free State books.
Right.
And then there was a gap, and then Chris picked those up, and those have done tremendously well and are really, really good reads.
Yeah. So
what gave you the idea with the Seventh Shaman books to write science fiction with a Native American flavor?
Well, backtracking again a little bit, when my writing career kind of went on hold during my Air Force career, I switched into the reserves so I could maintain the writing, and that's how I finished the last of the GANWOLD, the Sergey books. But after 9/11, I got mobilized and was pretty busy, and the writing went on hold. So I had to retire from the Air Force in June of 2009 to get my writing career back. And by then, my writing skills had just tanked, so I had to start over from scratch. But I talked with Dave Wolverton, also known as David Farland. He and I were in college together, and so he was my mentor and my employer for a while too. I did editing for some of his students for him, but I approached him about maybe doing some sequels or something for the Sergey books, and he said, "Well, no editor's going to really be interested in picking up a series that's, been on hold for 15 years at that point." And so he says, "Have you ever considered writing young adult?" And I said, I hadn't, but I could. So I started out with this, and I've always had an interest in the Native Americans. I'm not sure why. As far as I know, I have no indigenous heritage, but we did have a Navajo foster brother for many, many years, and I'm still in touch with him. And so I've always just been fascinated with the Native nations and their cultures. And then I also realized that as a people, they've been very, very marginalized. And I thought, we really need to have an opportunity out there for Native kids to see themselves in fiction. And so that's kind of what prompted me to actually go that direction, I think. Probably more marginalized than some of the other minorities we have here. And so I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. So that's where that kind of started. And like I say, the fascination, I've done some research on various aspects of mostly the Four Corners Southwestern nations.
Well, so, I want to tell you that that particular series was eye-opening to me. I had never read anything quite like it. The closest I think that I've seen out there that had any traction was Anasazi Boys, with the Neil Gaiman book, and that was fantasy, not science fiction. To have a strong Native American type of a character in a military science fiction book is something that I don't think that has been explored nearly in the detail that it should be, and I think you did a great job. This book and this series, I think, deserves a lot more recognition than it gets.
Oh, thank you. One thing, too, though, is Native Americans do have a very strong military culture. When you look at the percentages of people, American citizens who serve, percentage-wise, Native Americans are very high up there. And, of course, you have the Navajo code talkers that saved us in World War II, So there's a very strong military tradition. And, yeah, it is surprising that there haven't been more emphasis on them in science fiction.
I didn't prepare for this, but there is a gentleman of I want to say he was Apache. His background was Apache or Sioux, and there were like 7 things that you had to accomplish as a warrior to become a chief, and he accomplished all of them during World War II during his service. So that when he retired from the military, he had fulfilled all of the requirements, counting coup on an enemy, sneaking into an area, that was covered by the enemy. There's like 7 things that he was supposed to do, and he did all of them. I read the story about it years ago, and I found it fascinating.
That is fascinating. That's amazing. As far as honors for these books, Mountains of the Gods, the second one, the Christ is raved about, I've entered it. I haven't entered it in a lot of contests, but Dave Wolverton did encourage me years ago to enter, I think it was one of the early drafts of running in the book festivals contests. And so I entered it in 4, and I took honorable mentions in 3 of them and runner-up in 1 of them. And they're international contests, so I don't feel too bad about that. And then it's up for the Whitney Award, which I won't find out the results of that until May. But that's, I would be very, very honored to win the science fiction category of that.
Yep. Well, they're deserving. Each one of those books are deserving of all the accolades that they can receive.
I think I've been too busy writing to worry about entering too many contests.
I understand that. But now you've gone and done it. You have now started a second series, so you're going to be twice as busy. Tell us about GANWOLD'S World.
Okay. GANWOLD'S Child started while I was in college, and I belonged to a creative writing group. There were probably about a dozen of us. Dave Wolverton was in that group. And it started out as just kind of a what if. And at that point, I was going through ROTC, and so I didn't have a whole lot of writing time. I was trying to, due to some credits from previous schooling that didn't carry over, I was trying to cram 3 years of credits into 2 years to get my commission on time. So I didn't have a lot of writing time. Consequently, it did take me about 7 years to get GANWOLD into condition that was presentable. But it started out as a what if, this family is separated by war, and the mother and child end up cast away somewhere else away from the father, and the mother was also military, but they were stationed apart during the war. And what would happen? What could happen? And so that was kind of the seed of it. And it went through several drafts during those years, because every time I'd learn something new, especially as I began my own military career, I'd have to go back and change things. But along the way, somewhere, Orson Scott Card was the mentor to that little writing group we had in college. So I can claim Scott Card as my first writing mentor. And he did a workshop at the Science Fiction World Convention, which he won the Hugo for Ender's Game. But there were a bunch of us went out 3 or 4 days before WorldCon started and critiqued each other's books or manuscripts. We had to send in 2 or 3 chapters or something like that. And of course, we were all pretty brutal with each other. And so I cornered Scott in the hall after they ripped mine apart. And it was the first couple chapters of Ganwold. And I said, so is there any hope for this? And he looked me in the eye and he said, Diane, you're not going to have any trouble finding a home for this baby. And that was an early draft. And I'm going, okay, well, that feels... One thing, this is kind of funny. One thing he told me, though, is that by the beginning of the first chapter, and I had written it originally with a prologue, where Darcy and Tristan land on Ganwold. And he says, by the beginning of the first chapter, Mom has to be dead. And this is a pro who's just won the Hugo Award, So I took that very seriously, and I went home and I went through all the notes from the other classmates and stuff like that, and thought about it, and thought, if Mom is dead, there's no motivation for Tris to leave. There's no story. So I said the time bomb thing, where he's racing against the clock. She is dying, but he's got to find Dad to see if he can save her life. And so when and Scott said, well, let me know how things go, keep me informed of it. So when it first came out, and I let him offer, or would you like to, know what happened with it? So he took it to do a review for Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. And he after he read the manuscript, he called me even before he wrote the review. And the first thing he asked me was, the mother lives, doesn't she? And I burst out laughing. I said, Scott, do you remember what you told me after the workshop? And he said, no. So I told him, and then he burst out laughing. He said, sometimes it pays not to follow the advice of the pros. And I think he wrote that into the review for Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. I have not had a whole lot of contact with him over the years, but when we have connected at some point or another, he's always asked, what are you writing? Let me know. And so when I got ready to, when Running was about ready to come out from CKP, I contacted him and said, this is what I've got. Would you be willing to do a cover quote for me? And he did. So
he's a really nice guy.
He is. He's wonderful. He's an amazing guy. And I felt very, very humble again to have another cover quote from Orson Scott Card. So,
before we did the podcast, or started the podcast when we were talking off air, I had made a comment about you can be a good storyteller or you can be a good writer, and there's very few people who are both a good storyteller and a good writer, and those are the authors. And Orson Card is a great storyteller and a good writer. And he writes, most people don't know, he writes in a lot of genres, not just science fiction and fantasy. And years ago, it's out of print now, but if you ever find a copy of it, he wrote I guess I'd call it historical fiction, as near as I can define it. But he wrote a book called Saints, and it's the story of the Mormons movement from Idaho to Utah from the perspective of a very young girl who was like 12 or 13 when the Ku Klux Klan ran the Mormons out of Idaho until she was like 90 years old, and they were established in Utah. And it's one of the finest books I've ever read. Yeah.
We were, I'm LDS also.
Oh, okay.
So
then you're probably familiar with Saints.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I know the history. It wasn't the Ku Klux Klan. It was just local mobsters.
Oh, okay. I always thought
Joseph Smith.
Okay, I had always heard that it was the Ku Klux Klan behind the push to move the Mormons out of Idaho. I never knew it was not.
No, out of Ohio.
Oh, Ohio,
they started
yes.
Ohio, yeah. And they'd been in Ohio and then Illinois, where they built the city of Nauvoo, and then moved west from there. But it was just local people who really had it in for Joseph Smith.
It's a great book.
And those darn Mormons, And,
and their weird ways.
And their weird ways, yeah. So, I was at BYU when I met Scott and Dave Wolverton. We were all in a little group there together.
Well, it's amazing how small the world is.
It is.
How many people have brought up saints to you in the last 30 years? Besides
remarkably
me.
Few, actually. Amazing writer.
He is. And
amazing mentor.
They say don't meet your idols because they'll disappoint you, and he is the exception to that rule. He is every bit as nice of a person as you would think he is in your head by reading his stuff. So, how many books do you have planned for Ganwold's story?
Well, there's 3 in the trilogy that were originally published, and Chris and I have talked about the covers for the other 2, and the same artist is going to do those. And so we've kind of chatted, and he's asked. This is so fun. He asks me very specific questions about what the characters look like and stuff like that, and the settings and things like that. And I've already done the galleys for the second book as well. So, and the second one is Echoes of Issel. The third one was published originally as Dominion's Reach, but I realized that I changed the title to Tentacles of the Dominion, and that's a little more descriptive of what's going on. Unlike the Seventh Shaman, which is military space fantasy, I kind of call it that, the Sergey books, the Ganwold, are more military political, kind of an edge of thriller. So it's and the thriller component, the spy component, becomes stronger during especially in the third book.
Well, the book is also super tightly written. The story moves right along. You when you start reading that book, you do not want to put it down. There's no obvious stopping points. Once you get into the story, something is happening just about every page that makes you want to turn to the next page to see how that situation is going to conclude. And as we spoke about off air, you hit the lottery with your first cover. The cover for this book is beautiful.
It's gorgeous. Yeah. I just look at it and go,
It's in the top, probably in the top 3 of the covers that CKP has done so far. I don't know who the artist is, but hopefully he'll do the other 2 books for you, because he obviously understands the character and the story that you're trying to tell.
Yeah. Chris says he's going to be doing the other 2 as well. And I've realized, because Chris loves long series, and but there is going to be a definite conclusion to the Shaman books. Number 7 is going to be the last one. But I was on a podcast with Chris and Paul Piatt and Rob Howe last week, and they were talking about how many books Paul Piatt is going to be having. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, with the Abner Fortis books. And they were talking about up to 14, and I'm going, And I realized that, and then I communicated with Chris about this the next morning, was that for a long-term series, Chris is up for grabs. I don't have a conclusion. There is a set conclusion to Ku's story, personal story. But with Tristan, I told Chris, I can keep him indefinitely in his mid-20s. He's 19 at the end of the third book. But I can keep him indefinitely in his mid-20s and write a series of adventures that don't have to be read in any particular order. he can sort of go out there and be, kind of, I guess, kind of like a James Bond or something in all these different adventures. Not that he's going to be a spy, but that sort of idea, that I can throw him into all sorts of interesting situations. And that prompted me to go back through my files just because I remember that I had started at least one sequel with Tristan. So I went back through my old files and I found not one but two partially written manuscripts. And I mentioned that to Chris. So I've got to finish the Shaman books first. And but then, and I've kind of started jotting a few notes for things I can do with Tristan and forthcoming books.
And that's really insightful because when I was talking to John Sears after he wrote, or after the first Lunar Free State book was published, I was so enthralled with that series, and I knew that Chris had like the first four that John had sent him all in a bunch. So I had called Chris and I said, "Hey, is there any way you can go ahead and send me the other three that you have?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And so he sent them to me, and they hadn't been edited again, hadn't had a CKP edit. But so I was reading them, and they were all good. And so I talked to John just a few days after I'd gone through the 4 books back to back. And I'm like, "John, brother, these are great, but you're going to run out of stories to tell because you're progressing your characters and your situations so fast that you're not leaving yourself any rope, any room in between to write stories." And so he contacted me back, I don't know, a couple of weeks later. And he said, "I just want you to know I'm slowing down because like he went through 4 generations of people in the first 3 books."
Yeah. I've been following him on audiobook. So I'll put one of his on and listen to it while I'm doing the domestic engineer stuff.
They're great stories.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they are.
But yeah, those, if you notice those first 3 or 4, I mean, he was zooming through 100 years of history in 4 books. And I'm like, man, you got to leave yourself some room.
Yeah, there's 10 years between the first and the second.
Exactly. And, I told him it was like what happened in the Superman comics. Superman kept getting more and more powerful every year. And then it reached a point where there was nothing that you could write that he couldn't conquer because he was so powerful. And those stories went so fast that he was running out of room. So being aware of that and having a character that you can keep forever young and continue to write stories about is genius.
And that just occurred to me too, that I don't have to, I did find a pretty extensive timeline that picks up moments after book 3 ends and goes through. And I thought, because he's eventually going to end up in the Sferza, which is their Spec Ops force. But I thought I can bypass his 3 mandatory years of just regular military service and going through the training, and then just pick up with him once he becomes, after he's become a full-fledged Sferza, and then start throwing him into these adventures. And so, that'll skip, because we've already seen him go through his kind of his basic training, his pilot training, forced pilot training, unlike Coup. And I think, had he grown up in the shadow of his father, he would have loved piloting too, and it would have been more natural for him. But under the circumstances, I'm sorry, Dad, I don't want to go there.
An interesting story would be his first mission after he gets out of training.
And that's basically what I've got. Yeah.
So I think that would be really interesting to read, because at that point, he's not a fully formed anything. So you get to see, what happens during that training mission to create the agent that he's going to end up being, the spec op person he's going to end up being.
Yeah. Okay, well, here's a little bit of a teaser then.
Okay.
For book 2 is called Echoes of Issel. Issel is where he was kept captive, where the governor took him through all the caves and the mining facilities, remember, in Ganwold. And he gets to go back in book 2 as a scout.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
For this version. And that's all I'm going to say.
All right. Well, good, because we want to leave people wanting more. So, not that the Seventh Shaman and Ganwold isn't enough, but do you have anything else cooking, or are you going to focus on these two for the time being and until inspiration strikes again?
These are the only 2 series I've got in mind at the moment. Occasionally, I'll put out a short story. I've done a few short stories here and there along the way. At this point, they've been related to Ku's series, the Shaman books. But there's definitely potential for Triss, too. I don't do a whole lot of short fiction because I'm too epic-minded, I guess.
I think short fiction is harder than novels. You have such a small canvas to paint on, and you've got to put enough there that it tells a complete story and gets you interested in the characters. I don't know how people who write primarily, short fiction, how they do it. I think that's to me, that's magic.
Yeah, it's a whole different skill set. And it's, I've had to, trim back, because there have been a few anthologies I've been invited to contribute to in the past, and I've got short stories out there. But yeah, I've had to cut words out and keep it, within their allotted space. So yeah, it is magic. It's a whole different skill set.
So, for people who are listening to the podcast and who are not familiar with DT Read, what social media platforms are you on, and how can they get more information and keep track of what you have coming out and release dates and see pictures of new covers and things of that nature?
Well, I do have a newsletter. You can sign up for that on my website. And this is going to be a little bit tricky. I wish I could show you the website, because DT Read wasn't available when I went to get my domain name, so I had to. So it's, and there's no www. It's just HTTPS, etc. d-t-read-author.com.
Okay. Now, for our listeners, just so that they know, read is R-E-A-D, like you're reading a book, not R-E-E-D like on an oboe, and not R-E-I-D like some people spell it. It's R-E-A-D.
D. A-D, like read a book. And I married into that. Can you believe that? This is another funny thing. When I got married, I asked Dave, so do I keep my maiden name for my writing? Or he says, Diane, are you kidding? Look what you've married into. It even has a subliminal suggestion. I am Diane. You will read my books. So, yeah. So,
that's great.
So, yeah. And I went with DT because at the time I was first trying to promote the Shaman books. There was a lot of angst against male readers reading books by female authors. There's maybe why J.K. Rowling did what she did too, So you kind of, I've known several female authors that have done that, have just used their initials or whatever, because having a female name tended to deter male readers. Yeah,
because God knows that, women don't live life, just guys do. And that was said with tongue firmly planted in cheek.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's where DT Read came from.
All right, and I assume that you have some information up on the CKP website.
Well, the last time I looked at the CKP, of course, this was just a couple months after Chris took me on his website. He had not yet listed me as one of the authors. I think I had sent him my author photo, my official author photo, but he hadn't posted it yet. There were 2 or 3 of us that he brought on at the same time. And so I don't know but I've got my bio is on my website, with a long URL I just gave you. There's several links on that people can sign up for my newsletter. And I put that out once a month, usually around mid-month. and kind of this is what I'm up to and what's going on. I also have a Patreon, and that's www.patreon.com/DTRead. That's easier, just DTRead. Yeah, and then my Facebook page is facebook.com Seventh Shaman, all one word, or Shaman. And I'm beginning to wonder now if I'm going to have to come up with a second business Facebook page for Tris. So, or maybe I can just share, these. And the guy who reviewed Ganwold and first gave me the suggestion to share it with Chris, he and I kind of threw around an idea that once we've got the Shaman books done and the initial Ganwold books done, we decided it'd be really fun to do kind of a cross-universe story and throw Tris and Ku into a story together. So we'll see what happens there. They have a lot of similarities, but they also have some very distinct differences. And I'm thinking they'd probably have to work through a few things first, but then probably end up, becoming pretty good buds. So,
well,
so we'll see.
I want to tell you what a pleasure this has been. I think you're one of the freshest voices at CKP. I think you're one of the most unique voices in science fiction and fantasy right now, and I can't wait to see how the Seventh Shaman turns out, what you do with Tris, and then whatever else you have coming in the future. You are a breath of fresh air, and I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed reading what you've done so far.
Oh, that's so good to hear. That's music to any author's ears. Thank you very much for that.
So, guys, listen, if you want to know more about Diane, her website is d-t-read-author.com. You can find her on Facebook. You can find her on the CKP site. If you have not read anything by her, you definitely need to go ahead and get Running from the Gods, and then you definitely want to get the GANWOLD'S Child book when it comes out this month. She is a fabulous writer, and we are privileged to have her. Thank you so much, Diane.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to the CKP Future Books podcast with host Randall Willis. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving it a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you subscribe. Show likes and channel subscriptions are also much appreciated on the CKP YouTube channel. Finally, if you'd like to know more about this author or others on the CKP roster, visit chriskennedypublishing.com. Thanks for listening to the CKP Future Books podcast. We'll see you next time.